December 7, 1941, Pearl Harbor burns. The USS Arizona lies shattered at the bottom of the harbor. 2,400 Americans dead in a single morning. The Japanese torpedo bombers that delivered this devastation, the Nakajima B-5N Kates, had caught the Pacific Fleet completely unprepared. America needed an answer, fast. What they got was an airplane that looked like someone had taken a fighter and inflated it to absurd proportions. Critics called it the pregnant beast. Some called it the flying beer barrel. Navy brass looked at the prototype and shook their heads. Too big, too complicated, too ambitious, too late. None of them could have known that this ungainly bird, dismissed by skeptics as an engineering disaster waiting to happen, would go on to sink more enemy warships than any other American aircraft in history. The mathematics of naval warfare were about to be rewritten, not through elegant design, but through sheer devastating effectiveness wrapped in an overcomplicated package that somehow worked better than anything else in the sky. The story begins 2 years earlier. In March 1939, the United States Navy issued a requirement that seemed designed to fail. They wanted everything: a top speed of 300 miles per hour when existing torpedo bombers could barely manage 200, a range of 1,000 miles, a crew of 3 with armor protection and self-sealing fuel tanks, all ordnance carried internally in a bomb bay, no external drag, and most ambitiously, an electrically powered dorsal turret, a feature that had defeated every previous attempt. 13 companies submitted proposals. The competition narrowed to 2 finalists. Vought Aviation offered the XTBU-1, a sleek, elegant design that won initial praise. Grumman Aircraft Engineering Corporation submitted the XTBF-1, a design that looked like someone's fever dream of what a carrier aircraft shouldn't be. Vought got the contract. Then reality intervened. Vought was drowning in orders for their F-4U Corsair fighter. They couldn't possibly deliver torpedo bombers in the timeframe the Navy needed. The contract transferred to Grumman. Leroy Grumman's team found themselves with an impossible deadline to build an impossible aircraft. Chief Engineer Robert Hall stared at the mountain of requirements and did the math. Everything the Navy wanted meant adding weight, complexity, and systems that had never been successfully integrated into a carrier aircraft. The internal bomb bay alone was a nightmare. It needed to hold either a 2,000-pound Mark 13 torpedo or 4 500-pound bombs. The bay doors needed to operate reliably in salt spray, high G maneuvers and combat damage. The powered turret presented even greater challenges. Previous attempts at rear turrets had failed because hydraulic systems were too slow, too unreliable, too vulnerable to battle damage. Hall's team made a bet that seemed insane. They chose an electrically powered turret, betting the entire design on technology that had never been proven in combat. If the electrical system failed, the rear gunner would be helpless. Critics within the Navy were already sharpening their knives. August 1, 1941. Bethpage, Long Island, New York. Robert Hall sat in the pilot's seat as the prototype lumbered down the runway. The XTB-1's barrel-shaped fuselage seemed almost too heavy for a single engine to lift. The Wright R2600 engine, a 14-cylinder radial producing 1,700 horsepower, roared at maximum power. The prototype rotated skyward. It flew, heavily, ponderously, nothing like the nimble fighters pilots were accustomed to. Empty weight, 10,180 pounds. Combat-loaded weight, 15,905 pounds. This made the TBF the heaviest single-engine aircraft in the world. The controls were mushy. The visibility was poor. The aircraft demanded constant attention, constant correction, constant muscle. But it was stable. It could carry its full load, and the internal systems, all those intricate systems that critics said would fail, actually worked. Then came November 28, 1941. The first prototype caught fire during a test flight near Brentwood, New York. Both test pilots successfully bailed out as flames consumed the aircraft. The prototype crashed and was destroyed. Critics pounced. The design was too elaborate, too many systems, too many failure points. The program should be cancelled. Grumman's response was to accelerate. On January 3, 1942, the first production TBF-1 was completed. Less than 5 months after the first prototype crashed. Less than 4 weeks after Pearl Harbor brought America into the war. Here's a question worth considering. When does complexity become a liability? And when does it become survival? The Navy was about to find out in the most brutal classroom imaginable. June 4, 1942. Midway Island. 6 brand new TBF Avengers took off from Henderson Field at 7:10 in the morning. The aircraft had been in service for exactly 5 months. The crews had almost no combat experience. They were flying the most complicated torpedo bomber ever built into the teeth of the most experienced carrier force in the world. the Japanese combat air patrol fell upon them like wolves. Mitsubishi A6M0 fighters, flown by veterans of Pearl Harbor and China, tore into the lumbering Avengers. The TBF's defensive armament proved inadequate against determined fighter attacks. The Avengers were slow. At maximum torpedo attack speed, they could barely manage 130 miles per hour. The Zeros could exceed 300. One by one, the Avengers fell. Ensign Albert Kyle Ernest's aircraft took hit after hit. 20mm cannon shells punched through the wings, the fuselage, the tail. His turret gunner, aviation machinist's mate 3rd Class J. Darrell Manning, was killed instantly by a cannon shell to the chest. His radio man, aviation radio man 3rd Class Harry Ferrier, just 17 years old, was wounded in the head and wrist. The hydraulic system failed. The electrical system sparked and smoked. Ernest's instrument panel shattered. Blood from his wounded radio man sprayed across the cockpit, but the TBF kept flying. The massive radial engine, despite multiple hits, continued to produce power. The self-sealing fuel tanks, one of those intricate systems critics had questioned, prevented the aircraft from exploding when bullets punctured the wings. The armor plating saved Ernest's life when cannon shells struck behind his seat. 5 of the 6 Avengers were shot down. Only Ernest's battered aircraft made it back to Midway, crash landing on the runway with 1 crew member dead and 2 wounded. The surviving aircraft was later examined by engineers. It had been struck by at least 9 20mm cannon shells and 64 7.7mm machine gun bullets. Nearly every major system had been damaged or destroyed. 83% casualties for the Avengers at Midway. Critics renewed their calls to cancel the program. The aircraft was too vulnerable. The losses proved it was a failure. But intelligence officers studying the damaged aircraft reached a different conclusion. Ernest's TBF had absorbed enough damage to destroy 10 normal aircraft, yet it had flown home with 2 survivors. The electrical turret had continued to function until the gunner was killed. The bomb bay doors had operated correctly under fire. The folding wing mechanism had not failed despite multiple hits to the wing structure. The right engine had run for 2 hours after being struck multiple times. The aircraft was not too elaborate. It was too tough. Every intricate system, every redundancy, every backup had been designed into the TBF for exactly this scenario, taking damage and continuing to fight. The over-engineered, sophisticated Avenger had brought its crew home when no other aircraft could have survived. Production accelerated. By August 1942, dozens of Avengers were reaching fleet squadrons. The Battle of the Eastern Solomons on August 24 provided the first real test of Avenger tactics with experienced crews. 28 TBFs from the carriers Saratoga and Enterprise attacked the Japanese fleet. They sank the light carrier Rio with multiple torpedo hits. 7 Avengers were lost, but the survivors learned crucial lessons. The aircraft could absorb tremendous damage. The electrical turret could engage multiple fighters simultaneously. The internal bomb bay allowed for quick ordnance changes. The long range allowed for strikes far beyond what previous torpedo bombers could reach. But the most remarkable transformation was happening far from the Pacific headlines. In the cold waters of the Atlantic Ocean, German U-boats were winning the tonnage war, sinking Allied merchant ships faster than they could be replaced. The introduction of small escort carriers provided air coverage for convoys, but existing aircraft were inadequate for anti-submarine warfare. The Avenger, with its large bomb bay, long range and ability to carry radar, proved perfect for the role. The TBF-1D variant, equipped with ASB surface search radar, could detect surfaced U-boats at night or in bad weather. The large bomb bay could carry depth charges, bombs, acoustic torpedoes, and the top-secret Mark 24 homing torpedo. Avengers operating from escort carriers began stalking U-boats with devastating effectiveness. The tactics were elegant in their simplicity. Avengers equipped with radar would patrol ahead of convoys, searching for surfaced U-boats. When contact was made, the Avenger would attack, forcing the submarine to dive. Once submerged, the U-boat's speed dropped from 18 knots to 8. The Avenger would circle overhead, dropping sonobuoys while calling in destroyer escorts for the kill. From May 1943 to May 1945, Avengers flying from American escort carriers sank or assisted in sinking 35 U-boats in the Atlantic. British Avengers added to the tally. The sophisticated radar systems, the large internal bay that could carry multiple weapon types, the long endurance that allowed 8-hour patrols, all of it combined to create the most effective submarine killer of the war. The aircraft that had been designed to sink battleships was now hunting submarines. No other aircraft came close to this record. October 24, 1944, the Saboyan Sea, the super battleship Musashi, the largest battleship ever built, steamed toward the American invasion fleet at Leyte, displacing over 72,000 tons, armed with 9 18-inch guns, protected by armor up to 16 inches thick. Japanese designers had declared the ship unsinkable. 259 aircraft launched in 6 waves from 4 American carriers. Avengers scored torpedo hits from multiple directions. Each torpedo carried 600 pounds of Torpex explosive, far more powerful than standard TNT. The exact number of hits remains disputed, but estimates range from 10 to 19 torpedoes striking home. Just after 7:30 in the evening, the Musashi capsized and sank, taking 1,023 of her crew with her. The largest battleship ever built had been killed by aircraft. Avengers had delivered the critical blows. 5 months later, on April 7, 1945, Musashi's sister ship Yamato made her final sortie. Operation Tengo was a suicide mission, sending the super battleship on a one-way trip to Okinawa with only enough fuel for the outbound voyage. American submarines spotted the task force and reported its position. Admiral Mitchell launched everything he had. 386 aircraft, including nearly 150 Avengers, swarmed the Japanese force. The attack began at 12:37 in the afternoon. Wave after wave of Avengers attacked from multiple directions, overwhelming Yamato's anti-aircraft defenses. American sources report at least 11 torpedo hits. At 2:23 in the afternoon, the Yamato exploded in a mushroom cloud visible for 60 miles. Casualties numbered between 2,500 and 3,100 crew members from a complement of approximately 3,000. The era of the battleship died with her. So here's something to think about. The Avengers had killed both Yamato-class super battleships, 12 carriers, 4 additional battleships, 19 cruisers, 25 destroyers, and approximately 30 submarines. The total tonnage exceeded 1 million tons of enemy shipping. Was this success due to superior design, superior tactics, or simply having the right tool available when history demanded it? One Avenger pilot who experienced the aircraft's toughness firsthand was Ensign George Herbert Walker Bush. Born June 12, 1924, Bush enlisted in the Navy on his 18th birthday, becoming the youngest commissioned naval aviator at the time. He was assigned to Torpedo Squadron 51, aboard the carrier San Jacinto. On September 2, 1944, 19-year-old Bush was flying his TBM Avenger, named Barbara after his fiancée, on a bombing mission against Japanese installations on Chichijima. His crew consisted of Lieutenant Junior Grade William White and Radioman Second Class John Delaney. The target was a radio transmitter complex heavily defended by anti-aircraft guns. Bush's aircraft was hit by anti-aircraft fire over the target. The engine caught fire. Smoke filled the cockpit. Despite the fire, Bush pressed the attack and completed his bomb run, hitting the radio facility. As flames spread through the fuselage, Bush gave the order to bail out. He headed the burning aircraft out to sea, away from the island, to give his crew the best chance of rescue away from Japanese forces. Bush bailed out at approximately 2,000 feet. His parachute deployed successfully, but he hit his head on the tail stabilizer as he left the aircraft. When he surfaced, he saw no sign of his 2 crew members. Neither White nor Delaney survived. Their parachutes failed to deploy properly. Bush inflated his life raft and paddled desperately away from Chichijima. Japanese boats came out from the island, searching for him. He paddled for hours, growing weaker from his wound and exhaustion. After 4 hours in the water, the submarine USS Finback surfaced nearby. Crewmen pulled the exhausted pilot aboard. Bush was the only survivor from his aircraft. For his actions at Chichijima, completing his bomb run despite his aircraft being on fire, Bush was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. He would complete his combat tour, then return stateside as a flight instructor. After the war, Bush would serve as congressman, ambassador to the United Nations, director of the Central Intelligence Agency, vice president, and finally the 41st President of the United States. Bush flew 58 combat missions in Avengers. He experienced what thousands of other Avenger pilots learned. The aircraft was intricate, demanding, and unforgiving of mistakes. But when battle damage came, when enemy fire struck, when systems failed, the sophisticated design kept you alive. The statistics tell the story that critics refused to see. Nearly 10,000 Avengers delivered, over 46,000 combat sorties flown, total combat losses, 729 aircraft. The loss rate, 1.58% per sortie, was among the lowest of any combat aircraft in the war. Anti-aircraft fire accounted for 422 losses. Aerial combat accounted for just 47 losses. The elaborate systems that were supposed to fail rarely did. The aircraft that was too heavy to fight proved too tough to kill. Comparison with other torpedo bombers reveals the Avengers' dominance. The Japanese Nakajima B-5N, which had devastated Pearl Harbor, was obsolete by 1943, lacking the speed, range, and defensive armament to survive against American fighters. The Douglas TBD Devastator was slaughtered at Midway. Torpedo Squadron 8, flying Devastators from Hornet, lost all 15 aircraft and 29 crew members in their attack. The Avenger, flying the same mission the same day, brought 1 aircraft home with 2 survivors. That battered TBF proved what would become the norm. survivability through robust engineering. The Avenger's service did not end in 1945. The Royal Canadian Navy operated Avengers until 1960, using them for anti-submarine warfare in the North Atlantic. France operated Avengers from the carrier Arromanches in Indochina. Japan's Maritime Self-Defense Force used Avengers for anti-submarine patrol into the early 1960s. The elaborate aircraft that was supposedly difficult to maintain proved remarkably easy to keep flying, with many nations preferring it to newer, supposedly better designs. Modern analysis of the Avenger reveals design decisions far ahead of their time. The modular internal bay that could accept different weapons without modification anticipated modern multi-role fighters. The extensive use of electrical systems over hydraulics predicted jet-age designs. The emphasis on crew survivability over pure performance foreshadowed military aviation philosophy for the next 70 years. William Schwendler, Leroy Grumman, Robert Hall, and the engineering team at Grumman Aircraft had not just built an elaborate torpedo bomber, they had built the future of naval aviation wrapped in a barrel-shaped fuselage that critics called ugly. They had proven that survivability could be engineered into an aircraft through redundancy and robust construction. They had demonstrated that versatility mattered more than specialization. The design philosophy that created the Avenger influenced American naval aviation for decades. The emphasis on bringing crews home alive became central to U.S. Navy aircraft design. The focus on multi-role capability shaped future requirements. The Avenger was not just a successful World War II aircraft, it was a template for how to build combat aircraft that could adapt, survive, and accomplish diverse missions. Today, approximately 60 Avengers remain in various conditions worldwide. Several are maintained in airworthy condition by dedicated organizations and collectors. When a restored Avenger flies overhead, its unmistakable silhouette and distinctive engine note transport observers back to a time when these unlikely warriors ruled the Pacific skies. The Avenger that took off from Bethpage in August 1941, the ungainly beast that critics dismissed, proved them all wrong. It did not do so through elegance or simplicity. It did so through relentless effectiveness, mission after mission, year after year, in every role war demanded. The sophisticated torpedo bomber that should have failed instead rewrote the rules of naval aviation and sank more enemy ships than any other aircraft in history. In the end, it was not elaborate enough to fail. It was sophisticated enough to win, and in winning, it brought home more of its crews alive than any other torpedo bomber ever built. That achievement, more than tonnage sunk or battle stars earned, stands as the true measure of the Avenger's success. The aircraft kept its promise. It brought them home.